Uh, Good morning, one and all. A warm welcome to all. Myself, business executive at Manage. My name is Kaushik, and welcome back to the 23rd webinar of the Saturday webinar series on the topic blockchain disrupting the agri sector. Initially, thanks for your patience for waiting a couple more minutes for the other audience to join out there. And Center for Innovation and Agripreneurship is a center of excellence in agribusiness incubation hosted at National Institute of Agricultural Extension Management. It's one of the leading agribusiness in India. It's a leading agribusiness incubators in India. Managed CI has incubated more than 275 startups from various focus areas of the agri and allied sectors. Recently, in the news, we see Honorable Prime Minister has been embracing blockchain technology, which would be really beneficial for the agri in India. So, what is blockchain? Blockchain basically employs technologies to store data which is reliable, helps in maintaining the transparency, and this practice is implemented in the agri and allied sectors from now onwards in the future also. We see a lot of startups and corporates doing the practices, and this way of storing information, which will be very helpful for the leads as well as everyone. I request Dr. Sarvanan Raj, Director Agricultural Extension, National Institute of Agricultural Extension Management, and CEO of Manage CIA, to give the opening remarks. Thank you.
Yeah, good morning to all, and happy to see you today morning, all of you. And today, very exciting topic, that blockchain. And globally, people talk about traceability, and very quite interesting. Even when you talk about organic farming, produce from where it is coming, people. There are a large number of consumers. There is a lot of quality awareness are coming, and globally developed countries already it is in the place traceability. They know where it is coming, what like that, and not only for the produce traceability, but other things like insurance or government large number of schemes. And there is a lot of exciting things are happening, and using this blockchain, we can have where it is coming and what and entire thing that excites us. And also there are some of the innovators, and there are three of them are there with us, Mr. Abhijit, Mr. Anil, and Mr. Vikas. These all are founders, those who are working on blockchain. They are today with us, and it is really exciting to hear from them. And they are not only a few examples. There are a large number of other, like some of our startups. There are small startups. Those who are working with us in Manage also. They are working with this smart technology, like starting from blockchain to machine learning or artificial intelligence. And they are working with small few farmers, and there are private companies like that. Even the governments, some of the startup, they are working with a few governments like state governments, and to put the data in place, and so that many of the developmental schemes reaches the intended beneficiaries. Those type of applications are coming in the big way. And apart from that, maybe one government department we see, maybe Ministry of Commerce, we see the coffee board. Coffee board uses taking the 30,000 farmers, coffee growers data and putting in the blockchain. First time we were hearing some government department goes for putting the blockchain, so that they can put the coffee from where it is coming, which farmer is producing, and so that we can have the better market, what you can call better market, where they can take it's a core coffee or where it is coming from. We can have create the brand value, because this data, they can't alter through blockchain whatever they are telling. And that's why these type of startups are coming in the big way. And also government, other departments, schemes, all they try to use the blockchain for to reach the benefits, whether it is insurance or the direct benefit transfer, or these type of taking the produce to the global level, maybe the tea sector or the coffee. All it has a great potential. And some of them they use in warehouse and other things, and seed sector and warehouse. Some of them they are going to talk about today. And also there are some startups, they are working on the vegetable and fruit also, selling, and entire value chain they are making it. These are quite exciting, especially this something related to warehouse and putting. And there are a lot of people can't make it double claim, and there is no fraud, and they can have the receipt based on the blockchain based technology, so that farmers will be benefited. And these type of things. And also seed, again, seed is coming in the big way. TraceX, others might be talking in the seed sector also. And these type of things are quite exciting, and we may use in the big way for reaching large number of intended beneficiaries, or the data will be well protected, and that's really it's coming up. And we look forward to hear from three of the practitioners and what is their experience and how it is useful for Indian agriculture in the big way and different areas. Even globally, there is more than 150 startups they are evaluated, and they were telling something. It is very much useful for traceability and something like price insurance and those areas, and fair price, ensuring the fair price in the agriculture market also. It is very much useful like that. There are some 4-5 areas. There are great contribution will be there when you are using blockchain, and these type of things are coming in the big way. And thank you very much for all the three practitioners, those who are part of today's webinar series, and like all other participants, those who are from university faculties, and there are entrepreneurs are there, and there are agri startup ecosystem builders are here with us. And on behalf, like all of them, we also from Manage, we look forward to hear these three exciting presentation from the practitioners. On behalf of Manage and our team, I welcome all three of them for their presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for your initial thoughts about the webinar. And today we have three speakers out there, and we're going to hear out them their stories, their experiences with their startups. And starting with Mr. Vikas Jain, who is the founder and CEO of Aquis. His entrepreneurial and corporate experiences spanning up to 11 years. Has done his MS in Study Venture Capital Practicum from University of Maryland, as well as telecommunications and entrepreneurship, private equity. Also has done his bachelor's in electronics communication engineering from RV College of Engineering. I request Mr. Vikas Jain to start his session. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Kaushik. Hello, everyone. Pleasure being here today. Unfortunately, I'm recovering from COVID, so you might find me a little bit low on energy. So excuse me on that. But I'll try to at least see if we could not, be able to talk in a way so that you guys are able to hear and understand what I'm trying to say. I'm going to quickly share my screen. Hopefully, please let me know if you're able to see it. Is my screen visible, Kaushik?
Yes, sir. It's good to go. Full screen, sir.
Okay, great. ठीक है. So as Kaushik introduced, I run a company called Aquis Technologies. I've been an entrepreneur for close to 6 years now. Before that, I was working in US in a couple of technology companies, startups as well. So the way we started Aquis was, we realized there's a big issue when it comes to providing traceability, providing genuinity of products, right? When consumers purchase products, right, how do you ensure that what you're buying is a genuine product or not? So how do you build trust within the supply chain is always a question that we asked. So that's how we came up with the idea of Aquis. Aquis, is a company which provides unique identity to each product or each produce or each entity, right? So which basically helps in doing multiple things. So one, it helps you in ensuring that you are able to trace the product through the supply chain. Secondly, you can ensure that what you're buying is a genuine product. Thirdly, you can always, build other things like consumer engagement and loyalty on top of it. So we realized there was a huge need in doing this, and that's how we started Aquis. We've grown to close to more than 80 plus customers. Coffee Board of India is one of our customers as well. Plus, we've already protected more than 15 crore products. So our technology is actually currently being used by placed on 15 crore products, right? And that is across sectors. But today we're going to talk about agriculture in general, and we're going to talk about how blockchain can help agriculture, right? So before we jump into that, let's understand what is the current situation of agriculture in India, right? I mean, if you see, agriculture, is one industry where actually 58% of our population is actually dependent on agriculture. But having said that, it's still very, segregated. It works in silos. We also see that technology, if you look at technology, unfortunately, it's been very late in reaching out to agriculture. Other sectors have been able to use technology and utilize it and, benefit out of it. But if you look at agriculture itself, you see a lot of inefficiencies in the supply chain. You see that there's a lot of middlemen eating away the profits of the farmers. So the price that the farmer actually sells at versus what is available at retailer, there's a huge discrepancy, right? Uh, and add to that, you see a lot of fraud also happening in food, right? In between, there are multiple kinds of frauds that we see. We see that there's fraud happening on the seed and pesticide side. 30% of the pesticides sold in India are fake, right? Seeds, also a lot of seeds that go into the farms are also unfortunately fake. And on the other side, we see that a lot of produce, there's fraud happening in the, in the supply chain as well, where genuine products are replaced by fake products. We also see that, GI. So I'm sure most of you are from agriculture, so you understand what GI products are. So geographically integrated products, wherein we some products derive a lot of value, because of the fact that they are grown in a particular region and only available in that region. So you see that a lot of GI products, a lot of non-GI products get tagged and labeled as GI products and are sold to consumers. In add to that, farmers don't get paid on time, right? And they are not able to then further borrow money for the next cycle. Hence, they become very distressed. End up getting loans, and that builds on the debt. So you see a lot of issues right now in agriculture, and fortunately, even though it's late, I think there's technology which is now being adopted. We've seen that agriculture is quite open currently to using technology. Farmers we've seen are quite open, at least from our experience. We've seen that they are more than happy to utilize technology which can help them out. So that's good, and we're seeing a lot of technology now eventually coming into farming, right? I'm sure you might have heard of smart farming, IoT, soil testing, drones being deployed. So we're seeing that startups in this space, farmers, big farms, even corporates are, and of course government are actually coming in and actually helping leverage technology in this sector and ensuring that the benefit reaches the farmers, everybody in the supply chain, and in the end of the day, the consumers as well, right? So let's, so these are some of the technologies which, currently, of course, are we seeing around the world. We've seen a lot of startups, a lot of companies use drones and satellites to figure out the crop quality, IoT for soil testing, and of course for other data gathering. Big data is, of course, when it comes to data, when it comes to data, I think every farm generates so much of data which could be eventually leveraged and used back to improve the farming itself, right? We're seeing a lot of automation also happening, and the soil and weather analysis is also a very important aspect where farmers are able to use that data to understand and define what's the right crop to grow, etc. And of course blockchain, right? Blockchain is one of the aspects which is going to also help farming, and we're going to talk a little bit more about in detail about blockchain. And in the end of it, at the center of it, you have the farmer, and of course, things like mobile technology, how mobile technology basically ties into all this, and empowers the farmer to be able to improve production, improve efficiency, be more financially independent, right? So if you look at the farming currently, and I've touched upon a lot of these aspects already, right? You have an unstructured supply chain when it comes to farming in general, right? And I'm going to talk specifically a little bit more about coffee because, the presentation that I'm making today is a little specific to coffee because, I would like to share some data points that we've been able to gather from our coffee use case with the Coffee Board of India, right? So what you see is one is an unstructured supply chain where you have multiple people involved who do not trust each other, right? So you have on one end a grower, and you have on another end a processing unit, you have a retailer, and you have, of course, the government bodies who certify and assess the quality of the coffee or the produce in general, right? And like I mentioned, there is fraud, fake, and a lot of cross pilferage happening. There is misuse of GI tags, and add to that a consumer, right? When a consumer purchases a product, be it a coffee, be it any other agri product, how does he or she verify that what he's received is a genuine product? Is actually secondly is actually what it claims to be, right? And thirdly, there's no way for any consumer to see the trace or track how the product has come to be, right? There's no way for a consumer to figure out whether it was grown in Karnataka or Tamil Nadu, whether it was processed in a particular region, whether it's and of course, if at all it claims to be an organically grown produce, was it organically grown? So you see that there's no way for consumers to do that. And these days, consumers are, uh, excuse me. These days, consumers are quite aware, and they would want to know that information. And if a brand or a product is able to provide that, consumers tend to move towards that brand and try to, purchase more of a brand which is actually able to tell a story, be able to convince the consumer that what is actually being claimed is actually true, right? And one of the important aspects here is, if you look at the current problem, farmers don't get paid on time. The settlements are not happening on time. There's no, fair pricing. And commodities, for example, in this case, coffee being a commodity, prices change every day. So farmers are, a lot of times. Sorry, somebody is trying to annotate. I'm going to decline that. Okay. So yeah, farmers are not receiving payment on time, right? So, and that adds to the other issues wherein if they don't get paid on time, they are not able to pay back the lenders on time, and they are not able to borrow money further for their next cycle, right? And then if you look at produce that is currently being exported out of India, right? I mean, a lot of importers from other countries look for certifications, look for companies that are able to verify the quality of the produce, be able to confidently mention confidently prove that what you're claiming is actually true. So that becomes very important. So if a company or anybody is able to confidently provide the fact that, hey, what we are actually claiming to be the quality of the produce, whether we are actually fairly priced, we actually our farmers are actually getting paid on time. If all that data, if they're able to take back to these importers and be able to confidently prove that, hey, whatever we are claiming is actually genuine, then these companies get favored over other companies when it comes to import as well, right? And coffee being a 70% export product, right? It becomes very much important in this particular sector, and even in other produce where it's exported, like spices, etc. Uh, Plus, in India, if you look at the fact that there's no platform currently available for producers or processors to be able to sell online, or to be able to create a presence for themselves online, so that they are able to sell their product. And add to that, there's currently a lot of trust deficit between the various entities in the supply chain, right? So if you, like I mentioned, a farmer versus a processor, I mean, these two entities, how do they trust each other? A lot of transactions actually don't happen, unfortunately, because a farmer in Bihar is not able to trust, processor in Bangalore or Karnataka, right? So transactions actually, unfortunately, don't happen. And if the transaction had happened, it will have eventually helped both the farmers and the processor. But because of the fact that there's lack of trust, a lot of value is not being created in the supply chain. So what is really needed, and how do we address this, right? So one, like I said, data plays a key role here, wherein data can be leveraged in one collection of data because itself becomes important. How do you get that data? Secondly, leveraging the data to be able to optimize this supply chain and the production. And also, what is very important is automated payments, so that farmers get paid on time. The supply chain payments happen on time, so they're able to further use that for insurance and financing. What is also needed is geotagging, so that a particular product, where when it claims to be a particular product from a particular region, it could be verified. So geotagging would help in that case. Uh, what is all needed is a decentralized system, because a centralized system is something in which a central body will control that system, right? And if a central body is controlling that system, how do you trust that the central body is going to act reasonably fair, right? Hence, what is needed is a system which is decentralized, which is in control of every entity which is part of the network, and they are able to verify the transactions that happen, on that particular system, right? Plus, in addition to that, certifications of the produce, certifying the quality of the produce, something which anybody on the system should be able to verify, it also becomes important. And having contracts in place, automated contracts in place, wherein if a transaction happens, as soon as a transaction is completed, a further sequence of steps should be automated so that there's no dependency on anybody to complete those steps, and ensuring that data moves seamlessly across the platform. So that's where blockchain becomes handy. And one caveat here I would mention is, blockchain is not a system which can be used anywhere. Of course, there's a reason. There has to be a strong reason behind using it. And one of a few strong reasons we have already mentioned is where one, you have players in the chain which do not trust each other. They do not want to share data, or they do not trust a third party to control that data. And and of course, the data is being generated from multiple sources. In this case, having a system like blockchain, which is a distributed ledger technology, does help out. Plus, also ensuring that whatever data goes on the network, doesn't change, right? And is verifiable. So before a transaction gets committed to the system, it should be approved by everybody else in the network, and only then the transaction should be committed, right? So blockchain is something, it's a technology which actually has these qualities, right? One, it's a distributed system wherein instead of having a one centralized system, you have multiple systems in place where all of them communicate with each other, and all of them ensure that they have a copy of all the transactions that are happening. So what you see at the bottom is something which is an example from CoinDesk. Basically, it's a simple blockchain network example, right? Where all parties would have a copy of the data, and and different implementation of blockchain would provide a way of verifying the transaction before it's committed to the database, right? And of course, they use cryptographic hashing so that the data is secure and safe. And also, blockchain has an important feature which is called a smart contracts, wherein these are, think of your contracts in paper, which get implemented in code, right? In software, wherein if a particular event happens, right, a contract is automatically executed. And let's say if the contract is to make a payment, and the payment gets automatically executed, or if it's to do a particular action, that gets automatically executed. So in simple terms, blockchain is a distributed ledger. In simplifying that, blockchain is a distributed database in which transactions are committed. Once they're committed, they cannot be modified. And a very important aspect is the fact that blockchain is a decentralized system wherein no single entity is controlling the whole system, versus everybody is actually controlling the system, right? So how does a blockchain help, right? So it will, of course, fact that the feature that I mentioned, come in handy in ensuring that there's complete transparency in the supply chain, right? So if I'm able to, if a data doesn't change, right, once it's committed, and if verification of transactions are required, then you can be assured that whatever is on this network is real, genuine, and authentic, right? Hence, it's going to improve transparency in the supply chain. And now it can give you a complete trace of all the transactions that have happened. So let's say a farmer sold a bag of coffee to FPO, and further an FPO sells it to a curing unit, right? You can then, and these transactions are recorded on a blockchain, right? So now you have a trace, a verifiable, trustable trace of the fact that yes, the coffee bag has come from so and so FPO, and this FPO purchased it from, let's say, grower A, right? So now you have a complete trace, and you can verify that. In addition to that, using IoT, we could also capture data about the quality of the produce, right? So you can pick up the moisture at the time of collection of the coffee. You can pick up the weight of the coffee. You can pick up the outturn of the coffee and capture that into the network. So now you have data which is verifiable and traceable, right? And the fact that you can build in contracts, you can ensure payments are getting automated, right? Farmers are going to get paid on time. Insurance agencies would have complete visibility on how a particular farmer is performing, and hence becomes easy for them to procure insurance and financing. And like I said, payments can be made, so system can be designed in such a way that the payments are made on time, and hence it improves the financial independence of the farmers. What else would it provide? It would provide, transaction information, and of course, suppliers can also tie into the blockchain and be able to supply produce or material to the farmers, right? Fraud detection becomes easy now, right? Because you have a system that is traceable, trustable. So any kind of fraud that happens, blockchain by the nature of its design itself doesn't allow fraud. But any other fraud, which if it were to happen, it will become easily detectable. And it takes away the need of having middlemen, right? So now if I were to transact on the blockchain network, I could just be part of the network and transact with anyone. I don't need to, buy through middlemen for the. And then why would people buy through middlemen? Mainly because they don't trust. There's lack of trust, right? So a middleman basically helps in elevating the trust. But now with blockchain, you don't even need middlemen, because now you can be ensure that what you are procuring is something which you can trust. And the fact that payments are automated, it makes it easy for farmers also to sell the produce, because farmers are always worried about whether they'll get paid on time, right? And it provides real-time data. Now, any agency could easily tap into this and use and leverage the data to further improve the state of farming, right? So let's look into a little bit detail about how it can improve transparency in the supply chain, right? So one, if you look at what is the current demand from consumers, demand for clean, organic food right now, right? And if you look at the current system, a lot of people claim it to be organic. Yes, of course, there are certifications which need to be in place, but it's difficult to verify whether it's actually organic or not. And consumers are willing to pay more to for a produce or a product that they are able to verify. So this is where we leveraged blockchain in improving transparency in the supply chain for coffee, right? So what we did was right from the farmer to the processing unit, the warehouse, distributor, we got all of them on a blockchain network, right? And at the time of pickup itself, we tagged each bag digitally. So we provided a label to the farmer, a digital non-tamperable label, right, which they applied on the bag. And once the bag had that label, it became a digital ID for that particular coffee unit or the produce. And that digital ID was non-replicable, it was non-tamperable, it was unique and random, right? So, so that helped digitize the produce. And when the produce moved from one unit to another, uh, basically we able to trace it through that supply chain. Every entity here had a access to a mobile app wherein they were able to acknowledge the receipt of produce from the let's say from the entity prior to them, and also excuse me, also put in a transaction on the system as well. So let's say if a warehouse was sending something to a distributor, they would just scan the digital label and mention that I am currently sending this 50 kg of coffee to the distributor, and that transaction got recorded on the blockchain and the supply on the blockchain network, right? So now there was complete visibility of all the transactions. So when the consumer received the end item, right, they would again verify the label and get a complete trace and complete history of how the product has moved, get even pictures of the farming unit, get pictures of all the various processing units, get more data about location of the farmers, etc. So a lot of that data would be available to the consumer, and consumer can confidently now consume that product, right? And add to that, you can always also build in things like consumer engagement, loyalty for the end consumer, which a lot of our brands are also doing, right? So, if you look at this, this was an implementation for Coffee Board that, we had done. So we enabled a complete trace from the grower to the consumer. We captured parameters like moisture, weight, type, and outturn at each stage, right? And certification of coffee, which is very important. So we allowed sampling of each coffee, and the certificate also to be captured onto the system. And like I mentioned, display of farm locations, farmer data to build consumer confidence. So we brought in all these various units like the sampling unit, processing unit onto the supply chain. We also enabled a marketplace for everybody in the supply chain to be able to sell the produce either to the end consumer or an importer or anybody else who wanted to procure the product. So the way we did it, like I mentioned, is to be able to provide a non-tamperable, unique label, which would go on the coffee bag, and then all transactions that happen would get recorded on the blockchain, and eventually anybody in the supply chain would be able to use a smartphone and get access to the complete trace and track. And also we provided a dashboard to all the players, right, to be able to see what is happening. And this is a flow of the produce, from the grower to the retailer. So a grower would initiate a transaction by sending bags, and of course price is also very important, right? So we captured the price as well from government websites, so that at the time of pickup, the price was known. Farmer was handed out a receipt right away so that he would know how much he's getting paid, and that transaction was recorded on the blockchain. So we knew that the system knew that a particular consignment of coffee was going out to us, so and so collective. And when the collective received it, they would acknowledge it on the system, and that transaction would also get recorded. So now there's no discrepancy, right? I mean, a collective cannot go back and say, hey, I did not receive this bag of coffee, right? Because now it's been recorded onto the system. And further down the stream is how it works similarly. And of course, you had on the top a certificate authority where the samples were collected, and even the certificates that were issued were also captured on the blockchain. And when the buyer would then purchase it, the consumer, they would get a complete history of what is happening. So in this particular case, we used a Hyperledger-based blockchain system. There are multiple variants and flavors of blockchain network. I'm sure some of you might be aware. There's an Ethereum system, there are Hyperledger, and of course, there are a few more other systems that have come up, right? So in this case, we used the Hyperledger system because we wanted to have a private system. And in this case, because most of the players were private, but based on the need, it could be spec'd out, right? Based on the need and based on the use cases, we could spec out and figure out what would be the right system to have in place, right? So in this case, we provided complete trace and trust with the network, and we also had a method for anybody to be able to define some of the metadata which will go into the system, right? So this is a picture of one of the farmers actually, using a mobile app to basically get the bag into the network, right? So a label was affixed, and a label, like I said, is tamperable. So if you remove the label, it will get tampered, right? And it's a one-time use label. Plus, there are a lot of other elements which goes on the label, which makes it unique. So what I'm trying to emphasize here is, is blockchain by itself enough? Probably not, right? You'll also need elements which will help and aid in getting complete advantage of the blockchain, right? So things like having a non-tamperable label or non-tamperable digital identifier, right, becomes also very important. So that if you're trying to avoid fraud, right, and if the technology that you're using to digitize itself is not fraud proof, then blockchain in itself may not be enough, right? So you need something which is, you need blockchain. In addition to that, you need things like a non-tamperable label as well, which will help you and aid in ensuring that the physical to digital element, right, even that is protected. Because blockchain will give you security over data, but the actual physical aspect, you need something else. So this is what I was trying to emphasize here. We need a label as well, which is a secure label. And it was and the other aspect is a mobile or a system which a farmer is able to use easily, right? You cannot just have a system which a farmer finds it difficult to use. So you should have a system which a farmer is able to use easily and be able to and also you should be able to have it in a way that it's in multiple languages as well, because being in India being a multilingual country, we need to ensure that farmers are comfortable using the technology. So and in addition to that, having it in a way such that it works offline as well, right? If you look at a lot of farmlands, they are in deep rural areas, so where you may not have good internet access. So you should also be able to have technology to support that, wherein it works off internet as well, and then later on you could have it sync when there's internet connection. So is blockchain would definitely need aid and support of these other technologies to be able to, so that it's completely useful and 100% efficient. So these are some of our product workflows that you see. When a user verified it, they would get a complete trace. They can look at the certificate. They can get pictures of where and how where a particular coffee was grown or where it was processed, and even location of the various elements, right? So here is a picture of the label that we incorporated. Like I said, we used computer vision as well and we use a lot of hidden parameters in the label which are not visible to the naked eye. So it makes it difficult for a counterfeiter or somebody trying to duplicate or somebody trying to misuse the system. It prevents that because of the fact that uh, because of the fact that this label is non-replicable. Right? It has a lot of hidden parameters which are not visible to the naked eye. But using our technology, we are able to verify it. Right? So so what eventually we got was farmers were able to easily sell their produce. We able to get fair pricing. We able to get paid on time. A consumer was able to get complete traceability. Key players like government or agencies or certification agencies were able to get reports and track and be able to certify the produce as well. Um, and of course geotagging. So the fact that each produce were geotagged, we could be 100% ensure that it's actually coming from a particular region. So I'm going to just move forward because these are just some of our dashboard. But what were the other advantages we see of blockchain is what I want to touch upon here. And very importantly, financial aspects, right? Now, currently farmers have limited access to financial resources. The institutions perceive agriculture to be very risky, right? Because it's highly dependent and highly difficult to predict. And hence farmers find it very difficult to repay the debt. But blockchain would then help farmers to show what they've harvested, how much they've harvested, the quality of the harvest, and that would help farmers secure insurance, secure payments, for finance for their product, right? And because this data is now trustable and verifiable, right? Companies need not spend time in actually evaluating that. They can right away get the data off the blockchain network and be able to immediately send out payments to the farmers, right? And further on, farmers can use this data to procure crop insurance as well, right? Because again, like I said, data is easily verifiable. Insurers don't have to now go to the farm actually and get this data and verify this, because now insurance becomes so very easy for farmers, right? And now because they're financially independent, we can see a lot of other improvements happening, right? And the other advantage which I wanted to highlight here is the payments, right? Farmers used to often wait for weeks and months to be paid, right, after delivering harvest. But now blockchain can enable through smart contracts immediate payment and settlements to the farmers, and can decrease the risk and help them unlock new financial mechanisms, right? Because now farmers are getting paid on time. Banks can also now come into the picture and be able to provide new mechanisms of financing to the farmers. So initially, of course, farmers lacked ability due to they were not able to do due diligence on the buyers. They were not able to plan their harvest. But now, again, by the fact that blockchain, any entity that goes on blockchain is trustable. It will help farmers to do due diligence, and hence they can easily sell the produce to different buyers. And so it opens up the options a farmer has, and instead of selling it to a particular user, now they can sell it to different users as well. And blockchain, like I said, provides access to information on transactions and stock prices of goods, and gives you buyer information as well. So at the end of it, the information becomes very handy. Information is, like I said, information is is deemed to be the new oil. So information and data would help farmers, would help planners, would help the government in actually planning and making the system much more efficient. I think I've already come from. So these are some of the implementations that we've seen across the world where they've used blockchain. For a company called Agri Digital in I think Australia, right? They deployed blockchain to ensure that farmers are getting settled on, so that they're receiving settlements on time, which was not happening. There have been implementation in Africa. IBM, Walmart, and all these big players are also actually currently deploying blockchain solutions. Starbucks, I'm sure a lot of you are aware of, a huge coffee chain, has also implemented a blockchain system for their supply chain. So that was my presentation. These are my credentials. So these are my coordinates. So yeah, if you have any questions, I think we can take the questions now.
The questions we can take it in the answer. Is that okay?
Okay. No, sure, definitely. Thank you
Yeah,
so
yeah.
much. I'm going to stop sharing now.
Yes, sir. So, despite COVID, making it to the webinar is tremendous, sir. We thank you for your dedication and such an excellent speech. And I believe, like with blockchain, I reckon farmer can become financially inclusive. And going on to the next speaker, Mr. Anil Nadik, who is a co-founder of TraceX, and we also can say that TraceX is a part of our incubation. It's an incubating for us. And Mr. Anil Nadik has been into the entrepreneurial and corporate journey of 20 plus years. It's a big journey out there, and he's done his bachelor's in electronics and communication engineering from the reputed institute MS Ramaya Institute of Technology out there in Bangalore. Request Mr. Anil Nadik to start his session. Thank you.
Right. Looks like I don't have permission to share. You can enable that. Yeah.
Yes, sir. It's enabled, sir.
Okay. Great. I'm just sharing, so let me know once you're able to see it.
Yes, sir. You're good, sir. You can go for a full screen, sir.
Great. Okay. Hopefully it's visible. I'm also audible, I hope, right?
Yes, sir. Perfect, sir.
Great. Thank you, Manage team, Dr. Savanan, and my fellow entrepreneurs and all the listeners for having me here today. On behalf of TraceX, we are extremely humbled to be part of this session. What we do at TraceX is digitizing the agriculture for a safer, transparent, and traceable supply chain. And I think when it comes to bringing about the foundational pillars for any ecosystem to thrive, digitization plays a very critical role. And then having a connected supply chain where you know how things are moving through the supply chain brings about a lot of efficiency and brings about democratization of information access, and hence makes it fully transparent and accountable, right? So in that sense, that's what we're trying to build with TraceX. So let me start with a quick introduction of the team. This is Anil, and I have my partner Shivatsa. We started off this in 2019. Prior to that, we've run another startup called Jiva Bhumi, where we work on connecting farmers to consumers. And Raghav is our chief scientist. We've also been recipients of a few awards and so on. So just about what we are as a team. Again, I don't want to get into a lot of details on blockchain. I think there has been sufficient knowledge and coverage on that. But essentially, a few things I want to talk about in the context of where we are today globally, and as well as the situation in India.
So if you see globally and everywhere else, there's a lack of trust in large organizations, or be it even sometimes governments, in terms of how transparent everything is, right? Be it large organizations. I think recently most of you would have looked at WhatsApp's privacy messages and terms and conditions, and people getting very annoyed about it. Similarly, some of the policies that big tech companies like Facebook or Google follow, or the amount of data they capture and how decisions are being made. For example, leveraging a global platform like Twitter to moderate communication, for example, and who gets to uh, communicate, or who gets to propagate their messages, on what basis are messages subdued, on what basis are messages are openly sent out. So there are a lot of these questions in terms of who is controlling access to data and who is controlling everything, and it very often tends to be a very centralized access model, right, where very few people control the entire network, and that becomes a big challenge for figuring out where is the information, who is controlling it, and can I really trust what is coming out, right? So it's that aspect of trust that we have to be very conscious about. And when we talk about that and apply that in the context of what is happening and how can we look to solve some of those problems, right? The origin of blockchain, when you look at it, and again, some of the most popular implementation of blockchain, you might have heard definitely about Bitcoin, and it's the digital currency. And the reason that became more popular is there's a lack of trust in the centralized regulatory or the centralized bank to say that the information is being shared very transparently, and am I really paying for the value that is actually there? And hence a decentralized or a distributed system is what makes sense, where this consensus or the trust doesn't lay within one single authority, but it is actually distributed across the entire network. That way, uh, through the mechanism of the consensus and through the large sheer number of participants available in the network, it becomes more trustworthy and very difficult to hack, and so on, right? So essentially, moving from a very centrally regulated mechanism or a model to a more distributed model is what ultimately will provide more trust and transparency. And that's kind of what I wanted to leave you people to think more about. And in a way, blockchain is the foundation on which Bitcoin is also built, but it's more towards cryptocurrencies. And we can leverage the foundational elements of blockchain, which is the distributed ledger technology, to solve a lot of other problems where there are multiple participants and things are moving from one end to the other end, and there is lack of transparency and there's lack of trust between participants who may or may not necessarily know each other, and so on, right? So these are some of the typical use cases that you can think about. And when it comes to blockchain, it's also that you have a connected chain, essentially, with multiple blocks forming that entire chain. And depending on every use case, we have to be conscious about how to apply the solution, and it can become very complex sometimes if you don't apply it in the right way in order to solve the right problems, right? uh, if you think of it, just a very simple analogy I can give is everybody has access to the same version of the truth, right? So that way, if there are 5 or 6 participants in a particular chain, everybody gets access to the same version of the truth. There is data being either input or is being consumed through various nodes or various points in the system, but at the same time, that data is replicated across all the participants or all the nodes in the system. Hence, it becomes very difficult to tamper with the data all at once. And also, it is encrypted so that the data becomes immutable and very secure. So that way, this is what provides blockchain the robustness that it has today. And there are, I just want to emphasize a couple of other points that could be useful for the students, especially understanding the public blockchain and the private blockchains. So any chain which is open where anybody can participate, it is permissionless ledger. It's an open or public blockchain, but where the access is controlled, and that becomes a private blockchain. Typically, you tend to see a lot of public blockchain implementations around crypto and certain blockchain networks where everybody can see anything or anybody can openly participate. Whereas private blockchain is more for enterprises tend to leverage private blockchains because you tend to work with known entities, but at the same time, you want to be able to make decisions faster and you want to be able to leverage the data to control access and to control what information gets shared between different parties and so on. The fact that a transaction happened is important, but the value of the transaction may not necessarily, one may not want to share that because of business purposes, business reasons, and so on. Right? And I covered some of this. And ultimately, it can leverage, it can lead to transparency and trust, which is one of the key aspects that we're trying to apply in the context of maybe agriculture as well. And information once written in the chain is always permanent, available, and without consensus, it becomes difficult to make, or it's impossible, in fact, to make any changes. And there's plenty of audit. So in the context of Agri, if you want to talk about information, when the chain is connected and you know how a produce, how a commodity was produced, how it traversed through the network, and ultimately where it has been distributed and reached the customer. If there is tomorrow a food safety issue, then recalling the produce becomes, or tracking the particular batch which is a suspect, becomes a lot more easier. Right? So also from a regulatory perspective, a lot of this will provide more confidence to the consumer and also to the regulator to make it simpler to regulate and action upon. We saw the earlier speaker talk about different blockchain frameworks available. There's Ethereum, Hyperledger, IBM's itself, R3 Corda. There are a lot of blockchain is also another thing that you've got to understand is evolving rapidly, and a lot of contributions have gone into building the core, but also a lot of side chains and a lot of other experiments, especially decentralized finance and decentralized applications have started to come together, which has the potential to solve problems in many business cases that the world is going through today. So in terms of Agri, if I were to talk about provenance and traceability is one of the key factors. Connected logistics, agri-financing, marketplaces, all of these are quite relevant. And I'll talk more about what is happening today in the world as well. So maybe that will also give a context of how it can be applied in today's world. So when you look at the COVID situation that happened, there was a lot of demand for safe to eat food, especially because people wanted to know how it has been produced, where it was stored, how it was processed, because there was a lot of aspect related to safety, food safety, and understanding various aspects of the food, right? So to make sure that it is ultimately safe to consume. So what does consumers look at when you go to a Kirana store and buy a product from an open bag? You don't know what all it has been through, but a sense of trust is a brand. Sometimes a very starting point is always a brand, because if it comes labeled, if it comes in a packet, then there's a sense that it has been cleaned properly, handled safely, and all of those things. So consumers expect brands to be transparent, and the brands which also provide in-depth information about their products and how it was processed tend to gain more consumer trust, right? And when you look at it from that perspective, how can one talk about food provenance, and what is food provenance about, in the sense tracking the journey of the food right from where it is produced to how it is processed or aggregated and processed and distributed, and ultimately the consumer getting access to that. And also on top of it, how can we ensure the food safety practices, the quality expectations, both regulatory wise as well as from the aspect of making sure it is clean and safe to eat. And there are a lot of international standards that also apply for different products, so be it organic or GMP or meeting various ISO standards and so on. So ultimately, blending all of this and proving without any shred of doubt that this is what is the product gone through. So how can we build credibility to the claim? So a brand is making a claim that this is safe to eat, this is organic. Where is the credibility to that claim? So that is where we can leverage blockchain to build about credibility to the entire chain, how it's processed through the system, how it's moving through the system. So if you think about some of the, I talked about the supply chain credibility aspect. Coming to specifically in India, if you think about it, right, you have a lot of different challenges, which is unique when compared to maybe more organized or developed markets. When you look at it, India produces 80% of its food is produced through small and medium farm holders. Right? So that's a very significant portion of the food getting produced through that chain. And because of the nature of that production, it's inherently very unorganized and disconnected. There is lack of credibility in the claims that one can make. There is very little ability to track and trace the produce. Just one chain down to one chain up. Going below that becomes very challenging in many cases. It's also not easy to comply to quality and food safety norms very often, because everything has gone through different processes, and then very hard to be able to connect all of that. So that's kind of the challenge that exists today. And the way we are solving that is through creating a permission blockchain network called FoodSign, where we have different participants come together on the network and exchange information securely, and then and then also making sure that that particular chain maintains that data throughout from the origin all the way to the consumption point. And so a very typical chain here, is from the farmer to what seeds they use, to aggregation at a producer organization level, to how it was processed, to the various logistical entities involved, and buyers, distributors, and ultimately a consumer. For example, if the consumer is able to verify a claim by scanning a QR code, which then tells him the entire journey, the credibility of that particular brand goes up significantly, right? But also, when you look at the supply chain, when it becomes more organized, connected, secure, auditable, verifiable, there are a lot of other benefits, because with a connected supply chain, the buyer and the supplier are connected more inherently, and then the supply chain demands can be more leveraging a lot of artificial intelligence and machine learning. You can ensure that the supply chain losses gets reduced, and then with transparency and trust, quality inherently goes up significantly, because the producer today is producing as per the market demand rather than just producing just to sell in a mandi or to an aggregator, right? So that way, because there is more incentivization for the producer to do the right thing. So that's what a connected supply chain enables. It helps you close the loop, right? So that way it makes it more participatory, and ultimately leads to better impact on the entire chain itself. But also, I'll take some examples of how we carefully one needs to construct the chain, because not everything is adaptable to every chain. So it's very important to construct the chain appropriately. So typically for the food chain network, the connected elements are from the producer, which is the farmer, to an aggregation, could be an FPO, to resource institutions, to government regulators, to input providers, financing agencies, and buyers and processors. And the chain is flexible enough to connect all of the parties together to ensure that there is more credibility and transparency built out. And just as a case, one of the use cases where we work with one of the leading consumer brands in India, where every bag of chili they procure from the farmer is traced through the system. And there are multiple participants in the chain. There's a resource institution, to an FPO and a farmers, and also the government is involved in supporting through subsidies and other means together. The advantage is that with a chain like this, everybody, the buyer knows very transparently what is being produced. They can figure out if there is a loss in the production capability because of, let's say, a drought or excess rainfall. They can plan their procurement risk more effectively. They're able to plan for the price fluctuations more effectively. And the farmers are incentivized because they're producing a quality that the buyer needs, which the buyer has communicated upfront. So that way, the selection of the seed, to the right package of practices, to the agronomy support, and the inputs that have to be used, everything is optimized very well. So this way, the quality is not a surprise. It's coming out well because of the right design. So enabling a chain like this ensures there's a win-win for all participants, and that's why constructing the chain to make it right for the particular value chain that you're working on becomes extremely important. And obviously there are, if I were to take an example, saying there's a trust index, say trust index 1 is the lowest to 10 being the highest. If a farmer makes a claim that I'm producing this and it is organic, it's very hard to support the claim. So the trust index becomes very low. But if you have a peer network, other farmers vouching for it, the trust index could be higher. But at the same time, if you have a third party institution, like a certifying agency coming and verifying and saying, and certifying that that particular product is organic, then the credibility of the chain goes significantly higher. And obviously, as you bring in IoT devices and maybe a remote sensing capability and all of that, the credibility becomes stronger and stronger. But you will notice that the cost also increases as you start bringing more trust factor into the chain. But as long as there is enough scale and there is value for everybody to get realized, the chain can solve problems. And it is a journey. You cannot do that right from day one. You have to take the farmers and producers into confidence and slowly bring the ecosystem together. Right? In terms of the product itself, we have from the PHAP is the mobile application, which is Android based, works in multilingual, works in offline, so that even with less or no internet, it can work. Used by farmers and field officers to collect data and feed the data at the production side. And there's a very comprehensive post-harvest management modules where FPOs or producer organizations use it. And it's all web application, but also has a lot of collaboration features where additional processors, entities in the chain can be involved in that particular value chain. And obviously there's blockchain-based traceability that is also derived through the application by scanning a simple QR code at different times in the chain, as the commodity moves through from the production all the way to the consumption point. Like I explained with MTR Foods, it's one of the objectives is also to provide sustainable aflatoxin-free chilies production, higher incomes, and financial inclusion, and obviously better quality and better price realization for the buyer as well. Similarly, we work with Olam on promoting sustainable rice cultivation for residue-free basmati rice, where again different participants are involved, right? From Bayer, who's providing the agronomy advice, to the inputs, to European labs, which does the test for every batch of the paddy that is being produced and certifies that it is residue-free, and the buyer, which actually gets exported to the European market, and so on. So there's, when you have a connected chain and you bring all the participants together with a common objective, it starts solving a lot of the problems beautifully. And again, coffee chain, where one of the companies that we work with uses our application, where every cup of coffee is sent out with a QR code, which enables the consumer to verify the entire all the claims that this particular brand is making, like the coffee is 100% Arabica, ethically and sustainably produced, meets all the food safety standards, and it's the freshest bean as in roasted within a certain window, and so on, where the entire chain digitally is connected and uses the application to organize and process the data at different points in the chain. Right? So typically, we believe with a connected chain, the value realization for all participants becomes significantly higher for everybody who is participating. In export of coffee from the entire chain, from the production all the way to an export center outside of India, was all done through the system. So everybody gets visibility transparently as to what is happening for that particular batch of coffee or that particular consignment throughout the chains. And that solves a lot of problems, because today what you do with pen and paper, or have to trust and verify, re-verify through multiple channels, becomes very seamless. This is something that we work with the government of Kerala for an export of a banana from the farmers all the way to the buyer and to the consumer in the United Kingdom. And as we see, this particular consignment is currently in the ship moving from Kerala. It's in transit. So when the chain gets connected, the value realization back to the producer also is significantly higher. So when a buyer is paying a certain premium, they also get to know how much of that was actually passed back to the farmer very transparently. And this is, so that's why constructing the chain and making all the participants come together for a common objective makes it a lot more easier to achieve the objective. So that is this is something that we do in the milk value chain. And I don't want to get into a lot of details as of now, but I just sharing the possibilities of what all is doable with the technology like this. And this is we work with the government of Telangana on seed traceability, where we track the seed from all the way from the foundation seed to getting the certified seed out. So preventing fraud and preventing spurious seeds becomes very critical. And now you start seeing the ability of the technology to solve multiple problems, right? So getting the farmer access to good quality seeds becomes so critical in the chain, because otherwise the farmer loses the battle even before they get into that, right? So enabling the right access, the right quality of seeds, the right quality of pesticides, the right quality of inputs, or the right quality of finance and market and so on becomes very critical in enabling the financial, it's even, for example, the financial independence that we hope to achieve as a country for the farmer and the ecosystem. Right? So that right value realization is possible through connected chains. We work on multiple value chains, some of that which I explained, but the platform design itself lends itself to be able to connect multiple value chains seamlessly. And again, when you talk about benefits, the advantage with a connected supply chain is it helps you do multiple connect multiple organized value offerings back to the unorganized sector. Today, the reason why farmers cannot get access to a loan or a credit or to an insurance or other formal products is because there is no history of the transaction, there is no visibility of what is being produced, there is no visibility of what quantity, what quality. So the moment things become more quantifiable, it becomes very easy for other participants to trust that data and enable transactions to happen. And it's a journey. It's not like it's going to happen on day one, but as more participants in the chain join hands, it becomes beneficial for everybody to participate and get together. So better quality for agribusinesses, they can manage the risk more effectively. Have a digital enablement of farming access, farm ecosystem, so that way other services tomorrow, even subsidies going directly to farmers without any other intervention become significant, eliminating, I would say, instead of eliminating the middleman, it's like more integrating the middleman into the chain so that they get value which is proportional to the service they offer rather than disproportional in access to the service, right? So that those are things that connected network can ultimately offer. So and also from a blockchain perspective, the solutions are evolving rapidly, and we are also seeing that the better features, more enhancements coming into the system. For example, there is a ability for to have private channels in which between a buyer and a seller, a particular transaction may happen, that only the discovery of the price may be limited to only that channel, so that you don't have to openly declare it to everybody else. But as long as the farmer receives the payment on time or receives a certain committed amount on time, that chain is good enough to operate, right? So that these are all the things that a connected chain can offer. And obviously a consumer today is one of the biggest driver of adoption, because the consumers are demanding access to safe food, access to traceable chains. They want to know whether the chain is sustainable, as in, are they investing in a brand which is not destroying the planet, right? Because they know that this is the only planet that we have to protect for the future. So they want to invest in brands or buy products from brands which are sustainable, so not destroying the environment, which are not, which is producing food which is safe to eat, which are practicing fair trade, and so on. So that is a significant power that you can leave at the hands of the consumer, right? And this is back to the point I was mentioning about the credibility of the claims that a particular brand or any business is making, that can be verified by the consumer independently, by the consumer directly. So India itself is a significantly large market, with now with the export policy also coming in, where there's a lot of push towards making India also like the food basket for the world, so to speak, right? So we are competing with no longer just a local market, but we can also compete more effectively in the global market. So because India has one of the best agri ecosystems that you can think of, our soils are really, we have some really wonderful soil quality available. We have large farmer base. We have access to a great agri ecosystem. The more quality processing we can do and roll out value-added products, the more which we can become like the food basket for the world as well. So that's where traceability, for example, lends a large value to it. Again, leveraging our network, it's quite easy. Either you can take the full stack solution or only leverage integration into the blockchain with other ERP systems that that other participants may already have. So it's quite designed to be very flexible in that sense. So this is where I want to kind of stop and maybe take further questions as we go along the way. One thing I just wanted to leave you with a thought here, especially a lot of the agribusiness practicing professionals or even students who are getting into this into full time. The opportunity in the Indian market is significant. Even conservatively, we have 100+ million smallholder farmers, and even reaching 1 or 2% of that can transform the business model significantly. We have a huge consumer market here. We have such an unorganized play that even taking one value chain and making it completely organized, building value-added products can significantly add value to the ecosystem. So it's at least in the next 30 years, I don't see India backing out in any way. So that's the opportunity you're staring. So great, thank you for the opportunity. Happy to take questions anytime.
Yes, thank you for providing the digital solutions in the field of agriculture. And traceability, the system of tracking food is required for everyone to get to the source. And we right now invite the third speaker, sir. Questions will be taken in the end. And the third speaker for today is Mr. Abhijit Naraparaju, who is co-founder of Agri 10x. He's been into the field of blockchain for the past 7 years, and he's got a bachelor's degree from Sri Chandrasekhara Saraswati Vishwa Mahavidyalaya. Request Mr. Abhijit Naraparaju to start his session. Thank you.
Hi everyone, good evening. Thank you, Dr. Savanan, for inviting us. Could you give me access for sharing my...
Sure, sir. I also want to make a point, despite having a couple of medical or health issues, Mr. Abhijit is making to this webinar, and thank you for that. Sir, your audio is a bit cracking, sir.
Audible now?
It's okay, sir, right now.
Hello, am I audible now?
Yes, sir, perfect, sir.
This is better, sir. This is better. I think if you are using a mic, I think you can keep it not moving, sir. That's why that's the reason, because of noise. Can try now, sir. All good, sir. You go on.
I'm going to share my...
I think some...
Yeah. Hello.
Yes, please.
So, my apologies.
I think there is still...
Okay, I'll take... Is audio now?
Not that okay, sir, but there's another alternative. If any technical issues are there, I can connect you via phone, sir.
Okay, let me try that. Continue, I'll just... Yeah.
Now it is good, sir. The voice of the last
Okay.
sentence, it was good. Whatever you are using, actually.
My apologies. Okay, so I'm unable to... So, yeah.
You go ahead, sir. Meanwhile, I'm just trying to connect the call to WebEx, and I'll make a conference call to you. So,
Okay.
couple of minutes.
So,
Abhijit, your voice is completely cracking. Please, sir. Sir, your voice is completely cracking. It's better you wait. It's completely cracking. Hardly anything we can hear.
Maybe log out and log in also can be done, sir. That is another option.
Meanwhile, I think we can take questions, Kaushik. There are a lot of questions were pending. I think other speakers were here only.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
We can probably unmute and we can.
Yes, sir. The respective questions has been posted to you, sir. Mr. Anil as well as Mr. Vikas too. So you want to answer those questions initially and post that we can get some more in the chat box.
Yeah, sure, Kaushik. So I think the first question, can I go first?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, sure. Okay, thanks. I'm just opening up the chat here. I think it was a note from Dr. Rojit, if I'm not wrong. Okay, so it's about whether blockchain can be used in fisheries and what are the collaboration opportunities. Yes, definitely. I think if you look at fisheries or aquaculture in general, there's a strong use case for having blockchain in that. So happy to discuss with you further on that. Right. There's another question from Muralidharan about how mixing of raw material with unknown source by processor is detected. So the way blockchain would help in this is, so the virtue of the fact that, every transaction on blockchain is auditable and traceable now, right? And so which will help in identifying, if at all there's a issue in any of the raw materials or issue in the quality of any product. One, there's the certifying authority, which is part of it, right? So, anybody who's actually providing certification, quality assessment, at that moment itself, we will identify that, the quality doesn't match up to what is expected. And now that becomes traceable all the way to the source because of blockchain, right? So blockchain will help you identify and actually, identify these issues and these, mixing of raw material or mixing of adulteration of products, right? So this is how and in fact blockchain can actually reduce adulteration or fraud that happens, right? Because now it's auditable and you can trace it back all the way to the entity or the individual where the fraud or adulteration happened, right? So I hope that answers the question. I didn't understand the next one, why they expose the margins. I'm not sure what that is. I'm going to move to the next one. Label may not be tamperable, but the bag bulk packing shown may be tamperable. This question from Jamil. Yes. So of course, label itself may not be tamperable, but the bag may be. But what is being done right now is basically, the label is affixed in such a way that the bag cannot be opened without tampering the label, right? So it is sealed across the opening of the bag. Plus, there are other tamper evident measures in place to make sure that the bag itself is not tampered, right? So this is what we've been using, and this prevents any kind of mixing or integration happening as part of the process, right? For example, just to give you an example, blockchain is also used in, like I said, manufacturing of seeds and pesticides. In that case, the labels are used in such a way that is no way to open a bag of pesticide or a bag of seed without actually tampering the label. The next question was from Mr. Vijay Kumar, very nicely explained. Request to share risk, if any, in BCT for farmers and consumer. As such, I mean, if you look at more than risk, what we observed is how do we get them to adopt and be part of this technology. There is a little bit of learning curve, a little bit of education needed. But at least for our implementation, at least with Coffee Board and other players, as long as the technology is friendly enough, for farmers to use, we've seen that farmers are quite open to adopting it and using it. So the roadblock I mean, if I have to rephrase this question, yes, the roadblock would be, the barrier would be in terms of the usage of technology, how we can make it easy, user-friendly for both the consumers and the farmers. And we've seen with our experience that as long as it's easy to use, adoption of technology is not difficult, right? Um, how can we do physical or digital transaction without digital currency in blockchains? Sorry, I haven't understood this question. I think it's from Ashutosh. Uh, if you could explain it again, and if you're able to unmute yourself, and in the meanwhile, we'll take up the next question. Do we have any government regulatory body to regulate blockchain technology in order to ensure that the information provided by you is accurate? The idea of blockchain is actually to deregulate the system, to decentralize the system. And the fact that every transaction gets verified by all the players, and government can be one of the players too, right? But we don't, the idea is to avoid central authorities control for one particular entity. Having said that, having said that, government can itself can be one of the nodes in a blockchain, which could be verifying the transactions as well, right? So you would actually want to avoid bringing in the government to deregulate it, but however, said that government can be one of the entities which is actually and having some rules in place in the network where the transactions are verified by them, if at all a structure like that is needed, right? Uh, because the fact that every transaction is getting verified by all the players, makes it more trustable than having a central authority like a government, where in fact there's a room to modify transactions, modify things. Actually, especially it's having something like that makes it redundant and actually open to uh, you know fraud of some kind. So, like I said, it's decentralized for a reason, and because it provides more trust, right? The next question is blockchain hardware or a software? Uh, so I would say that it's at the end of the day, you would always need some hardware or infrastructure to be able to support an implementation, right? So blockchain, in a sense, it's an implementation. It's a technology implemented via software. But of course, you need hardware to be able to support it. If it's a decentralized network, you need systems to be in place, computers to be placed so that they can process and verify a transaction. I'm sure you've heard of concept of mining in Bitcoin, where transactions are verified, and for that you definitely need good processors in place. So it's an implementation via software, but of course you need hardware to be able to support that implementation. So I think these were the questions that were referred to me, Kaushik. Anything else you want to pick it up?
Initially, this is are the questions, sir. I will go for the next speaker's question. Post that again, we can get in the chat box.
Sure. Thank you.
Mr. Nanil, you can take up your questions.
Right. Okay. Maybe I can also comment on a couple of them that Mr. Vikas was also referring to, but I will talk about some of the questions directed towards me. Could you please give real business case scenarios where farmer wants to sell his product, where consumer wants to buy the product directly from the farmer using blockchain technology? So what ends up happening in any network, or forget blockchain, but in general in real business situation, is that the farmer today, especially the smallholder farmers, the quantum of what they produce sometimes is not sufficient to reach to a market beyond the immediate vicinity of what they have. Right? So within the local vicinity, let's say within the same village or a local district, you don't need technology itself. You can always go to the local market and sell. But when you're looking to connect to a market outside of that network, be it international market or even a national market, the idea is to be able to connect in such a way that the economics of that particular transactions are viable. So that is why in many of the cases, I'm talking about real cases here, where we work with farmer producer organizations. So here the advantage is that there is aggregation of produce for about 500 or 1,000 farmers coming together, there is sufficient production available, which a larger business is able to pick up. Right? Even the farmer producer company can make their own brand and sell to the consumer as well. So ultimately, deploying the technology to enable that will solve the problem. Obviously, with blockchain, we can ensure the entire system is connected and there is better transparency and trust, and ultimately you're able to get a fair price. So that's in a nutshell how one can leverage the system here. But it's also more the emphasis here is also to design the system so that it can solve the problem effectively, right? So that is what I was explaining. The other question is what kind of improvement in income revenue across the value chain have you observed post implementing blockchain based traceability? In some of the cases, we have seen that there's about 10 to 15% reduction in cost of production, mainly because of the aggregation and access to better agronomy practices and so on. It also increased the productivity by the cost of production has come down. Increase in productivity has also happened, but again 10 to 15%, and it tends to vary depending on what the baseline is really, right? In many of the cases, the baseline was quite low, so we've observed even 30-40% increase, mainly because the practices that were done previously were not necessarily of any measurable standards, fairly unorganized and very ad hoc and so on. And also because of effective market linkage, they were able to get about 20% premium in the product based on the quality. They were able to get 20% premium. So net, on an average 40 to 50% increase, and it varies by commodity and the baseline that we start with. So that is something that one has to be conscious about. And then another question is, can we develop a blockchain in fisheries? Definitely, we'd be open to it. We're having a couple of conversations on that with the government and a few other agencies. So happy to work together on that. You can reach out to me for sure for discussion. What is the cost of enabling blockchain for cases like MTR? Though the idea essentially of any blockchain network is to see how we can create value for all participants, hence take a small transaction fee in order to be able to run the network and also sustain and grow, right? So the way we are positioning it is either they pay a license fee for using the product, or we base it based on a transaction-based pricing model. We also have API-based model. We're happy to discuss it. It is contextual, because depending on the volume and size of that particular project or that particular operation, the cost is determined. So happy to discuss further on that one-on-one. There's another question: between packing and repacking, if quality change or adulteration has been done by the stakeholder, and how to verify. So there are multiple ways. Like I was explaining, the construct of the particular chain is very important. If in the chain, if there is a need for a particular verification to be done because you are seeing a lot of adulteration and all that, then those precautions have to be taken, or a verification process for that also has to be integrated into the blockchain network. And also because blockchain is able to maintain the batch level information or the lot level information for tracking and tracing at every point in the supply chain. If you identify a batch which is indeed not meeting the expected standards, you can always trace that back in the chain and identify at each point if there was any adulteration based on the parameters that have been recorded. If it's beyond the parameters that already have been recorded, then the system has to be bolstered or enhanced to capture additional parameters to prevent such a thing from happening. So it is just because there is blockchain doesn't mean you can avoid everything. It's just that the design of the system or the chain becomes very important there. And how this will benefit the small or medium-sized farmers, like I said, again, when working with farmer producer organization, aggregating their produce and them being able to, for example, today MTR is able to buy from a farmer producer organization itself is a great thing, because they would only buy from traders earlier because they don't have the capacity or the bandwidth to go to every individual farmer and purchase from them. But today they're able to do that because with the network, there are other participants taking ownership and making sure that the expected quality is made available to them. Hence, there's more value coming back to the farmer directly. So that's the construct with we've seen with the Beat with Olam or Tortorellis or quite a few other projects that we have done so far. So this set of questions I have for now. Happy to answer more. I didn't check the chat directly, but maybe we can pick up a few more if time permits.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir, for answering the questions. Right now, we'll go with the third speaker. Suppose that if we have time, we can go for the questions, sir. And request Mr. Abhijit to start his session, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Savanan, for inviting us. I'm Abhijit from Agri10X. We started this project in 2017. So what we did is we've integrated the entire post office management system. So me and my other co-founders, who has a pretty decent experience on the blockchain and the data science. So in fact, we met in a blockchain conference and we thought of working on the use cases in which sector that we need to penetrate and work upon. So we figured out agriculture is the best sector that to work on, and in fact, we've chosen post harvest management system, whereas as it is unorganized sector and we have a lot of elements that could be integrated, and so that it can all these stakeholders can be on one single platform. So that was our initial ideation, and we started working in 2017, and by 2019 we built our product, and we did a couple of use cases and pilots on grapes and pomegranate, so where we have studied the entire value chain. So basis on the study what we have gone through, so we have incorporated the changes in our platform. So I'll explain more on the how does our platform work, and how we onboard the farmers and as well as the traders and the typical product cycle. So here, so we have 5 modules on our platform, which is KYC modules, where we onboard farmers, FPOs, uh, and as well as few individual big farmers as well. And on the other hand, so we onboard corporates, processing units, and as well as wholesale buyers. So here, when we onboard a farmer, so we also collect, we geotag the farm location as well as we collect their harvesting schedule and how much acreage these guys, the produce is from. So we collect all the basic information from the farmer side of view and farmer point of view, and then we collect the information. At the same time, so we geotag their farmland. So that's on the KYC module. And once we get the harvesting schedule onto our platforms, so there'll be a typical indent from the buyer side as well, based on the produce availability from that particular region. So based on that indent, we built an application for the quality assessment. So we have our in-house application for the quality assessment for the horticulture produce, which is mandatory in our trade process. So for each and every produce, the QA is mandatory, and upon the QA certification, the farmer can place his sell request onto our platform. So this will be a kind of indicative to the buyer on the quality and the grading of the produce. So based on this, the prices quotation exchange happens from both the entities. And once the QA is done, it goes for the trading module. And once the trade has been placed, so we have also onboarded the other players, which is logistic vendors, so supply chain guys into our platform, so where they can. So we are mobilizing the rural logistic vendors from that particular region, and we take cognizance of their input as well. And upon that, it reaches to the buyer destination. So in the whole process, so we are emphasizing more on the farm gate pickup. So the moment there's a request from the buyer side, so there will be a X amount of money which will be deposited into the farmer's account, that will be on the escrow. And once the sorting and the grading at the farm gate happens, and before the truck leaves from the farm, the entire money will be deposited onto the farmer's account by taking cognizance of the farmer, our representative, logistics vendor, and as well as the buyer. So that's how we build the chain, the entire. So we integrated the entire value chain of Agri, and the backend technology is purely obvious. It's once on blockchain. So we are collecting as much as data pointers on each and every stage of the value chain, so that we could give more services to the farmer. Let me give you an example how we have incorporated. So if you consider tomato farmers an example, so tomato farmers has their own requisites, because they don't have a market access, market reach, or they typically end up reaching out to the local mandi or the local market which is available. So on our platforms, what we have done, so we have interstate and interstate trade happens onto our platform. So we have a huge network of buyer network. So this, but the moment the farmer puts his request that he has got this much of produce available, and this is the typical harvest date, so this information goes to all the buyers, and basis on their request, they could pre-book as well as, and they can execute the trades onto our platform. So we have also incorporated some few value-added services for different regions. In fact, for the tomato buyers, so we have incorporated the crates and packaging materials, which is again embedded with the QR code system. And for onions and onion farmers, so we are working on the labor management system as a value-added service, so that the sorting and grading happens at the farm gate level, and which could enhance their price metrics as well. So by integrating blockchain onto a system and by streamlining this entire value chain, so we could leverage more than 15 to 18 percentage of the value chain uh, reduction, in the sense farmer is getting the better price, and as well as the buyer is getting the good produce by sorting and grading happening at the farm gates itself. So the advantages on the buyer side, on the seller side, is mostly on the on-time payment, and before the truck leaves the place, he's getting his payment. At the same time, as his market accessibility not only restricted to the local or the particular state, he has access to the across India. And in terms of the buyer, so they have got their own pre-scheduled consignments. At the same time, basis on that, they could manage their procurement system. That's for the corporates, and again for the wholesalers, they have access to many commodities available across India. So to get, I mean, we are not saying that it is 100% digital at this moment. So it's a purely the phygital model that is happening now. So probably after a year and a half, we can expect entire digital model. So right from the onboarding to the delivery, so we are having managing a consensus network of each and every stakeholder. So for the KYC and the QC of the produce, so we are taking cognizance of the QC guys and as well as our field officers. And for the QC to the logistics, taking cognizance of the farmer, QC, and as well as logistic player. And so depending on the level we are in, the trade is at the value chain, the number of stakeholders are in part of the taking cognizance and the governance model. That's how we build the system. So far, we have presence in more than 4 states, and we are expanding to 8 states. So we've partnered with Government of India, and where we are leveraging their village level entrepreneurs, so that we are leveraging more than 4 lakh VLEs across India. They can onboard the farmers, and farmers can place their request onto the platform in terms of produce availability and their harvesting schedule. Basis on that, the buy and sell happens onto our platform.
Uh, Mr. Abhijit, are you done with your presentation?
Yes, for sure.
Okay. So we can go for a common FAQ, sorry, common Q&A session for all the speakers. And people can raise their hands, or they also can keep the questions in the chat box. Also, we have a couple of other questions. I'll keep it in the chat box and also in WhatsApp, so that it will be easy for you guys to take any respective question regarding your organization.
So okay, there's a question: have you implemented blockchain in fruits and vegetables, as those products needs to be consumed within limited period of time, hence reduces the time of producers to consumers? Have you foresee blockchain in horticulture produce? Okay, so again, it's a very dynamic game dealing into the perishables and especially the horticulture produce. The tag for the supply is typically less than 12 hours in terms of right from harvesting to the reaching out to the destination, and it may vary from commodity to commodity. So what we have done is the quality matters a lot in terms of dealing in mostly in the horticulture produce. So as I said, so we have our own inbuilt application to which assess the quality and the grade of the produce based on the physical parameters, right? The moment farmer gets on board, he also puts his the certificate, I mean the puts his certification uploaded onto our platform, and it is generated internally, and as well as our field officers and our VLEs go and visit the field personally, and they check. So that's the reason I've said it's a phygital model. So there will be a digital verification, at the same time physical verification happens. If the tonnage is more than 10 and above, definitely it requires a physical verification. That information is put in onto the system. At the same time, this the moment they've uploaded the information onto the system, updated onto the system, it triggers to the buyers, and basis on that that a buy and sell happens, and you can expect the typical trade window is for the 3 hours, and the moment it is accepted, the farmer can supply the produce to the buyer directly, or the buyer can access the logistics which is available through our platform. So we mobilize the local logistics players from that particular region, and we ensure that through the platform it is delivered to the consumer, I mean the buyer. So as I said, so we have value-added services onto our system as well. So where we have leveraged more than 1,000 logistic vendors remotely. So they are part of the consensus as well. So we take acknowledgement from the farmer, logistic vendor, and as well as buyer before settlement of any produce. So it's
Mr. Vikas as well as Mr. Anil also can take up the questions if they are pertaining to their particular organizations regarding the implementation of
there's a
blockchain.
question for implementing blockchain. Is it good to develop it in-house or take the service from a software firm? So it's pretty, I mean, it purely depends on your business model, whether it is a blockchain as a service or purely on the service oriented as a platform. So it depends on the business model, what you want to build. So basis on that, you could leverage the services.
I think there was a question earlier, not able to see it now, about, I think, okay, I found it. If we have non-tamperable labels, third-party certifications, GPS monitor vehicles, etc., auto weighing systems, why do we need blockchain? Why with above technology? Okay, I lost it again. Okay, because it's getting scrolled. Anyways, I think I'll try to answer that question. Yes, not see blockchain. We don't need to fit the solution, a product to a use case just because it's novel or it's new, right? There are advantages which blockchain provide. There could be a use case where you don't really need a blockchain, where you're able to use other systems to ensure there's no fraud. You can prevent fraud. You can also just go with a digital ledger instead of a blockchain, right? So blockchain is one form of digital ledger, but you can just have a simple pure digital ledger, um, uh, and you don't need to really have a blockchain system in place to actually for your particular use case. So it depends on a lot of factors. How do you arrive at whether you really need a blockchain system or not? Like I said, and I think other speakers also mentioned. One, are the players sharing data? Are they independent? Can you have a single entity in place who can actually manage this system? If yes, then if you're able to trust a third party, then you really don't need a blockchain system, right? But let's say if that's not the case, you don't have a single third party or a single entity which could manage the system. You have players who are completely independent and don't trust each other. You want to transact with each other and you provide a trustable source. So in that case, is where a blockchain becomes handy. Just to summarize again, yeah, not every use case requires blockchain. It needs to be evaluated. It needs to be seen whether actually a blockchain is needed. In some cases, you could just have a pure digital ledger database, like a lot of companies do offer that system now. So you could just have that and not a blockchain system, and still be able to provide the various elements you're trying to provide, for example, trustability, traceability, etc.
There's a question: how you connect CSC by Mr. Sanjay. So we have connected our systems and portals with the CSC network, which is where they can reach out to the CSC centers, the nearest CSC center, and they can onboard as a farmer, and they can update their farm details, as well as the commodity and as well as the harvesting schedule. Our VLE will go and physically check the farm, and he geotags it, and once there's a the harvesting schedule starts, so you can update it onto our platform. It is QA will be done automatically, and once the quality assessment is done, and then the sorting and grading happens at the farm gate, and it can you can place a trade request onto the platform, which will be executed. So in fact, during COVID, so with CSC support, in fact, we have exported lychee from Bihar, and as well as pineapple from Northeast. So there's a question: we want to collaborate for developing blockchain fisheries. How to initiate the discussion? So Agridenex is not into the fisheries at this moment. Probably Vikas, you could take this question, I guess.
Sure. I mean, I left my coordinates. I'm happy to put it in chat again. Please write to us. Happy to have a discussion on that. I'm putting my email on the chat.
Mr. Rakesh, you want to go for a question?
Yes, sir. Yeah, thank you all. This is Rakesh, sir. I'm also some of the points really, painful, and really you all are working. Vikas sir and Anil sir and both Abhijit, all are working good. So there are some features we are also developing. Can you just we have also invested our own self-funding about 1.3 crores. We are working in the agri sector area. And we want some precautions while developing the software oriented things, what and all to consider, what and all not to consider, especially getting the instant cash to the farmers, because rightly said, and Anil also said, and Anil sir also, Abhijit also.
I mean, if I understand correctly, you wanted to understand what are the precautions you can take for the software? I mean, if you're asking blockchain in general, of course, you need to understand first, like I said, first thing to evaluate is whether blockchain is actually needed for a use case that you're trying to build, right? Or build for. So, you don't want to over-engineer anything if it's that not the case, right? So first evaluating whether a blockchain is actually needed. And there's a very good flow chart online. If you just search online, you should be able to get it. Answer those basic questions, arrive at the fact that whether blockchain itself is needed, and then evaluating, what kind of blockchain you would need, whether you would need a permission blockchain or a public blockchain or public permission blockchain. So the multiple variants of blockchain, you need to evaluate which one you need to you need for use case. It depends on how open you need it to be. For example, Bitcoin is a public system, hence it has to be completely open. But if there are only few players involved and they are able to interact with each other, then you could have a private blockchain as well. Or you could have a system wherein verification is allowed to public, but transactions are only allowed to private, right? So you could have a hybrid system. And then post that, you need to understand, based on your question of whether you need public, private, etc. You would then have to arrive at what framework to use. And I think Anil had a very nice slide on that about different types of frameworks available. So you could have Hyperledger, you have Ethereum-based framework, and a lot of new frameworks have also come up. So figuring out which system to be in place, and then defining your infrastructure and so on and so forth. So there's a nice template, I think, to it, and there are a lot of initial understanding of the problem becomes clear. Uh, you don't need to fit a solution to every problem. You need to first understand what the problem is and then arrive at what solution to use. And these are things you'll have to keep in mind. Just because blockchain is, as a word, it's got a little bit of hype around it, doesn't mean we have to use it every time. It has to be used every time. It has to be a proper understanding of the use case and then go about implementing it. Hope that answered your question. Other speakers will add to it.
Yeah, and I just want to add, if your question is about developing software, and if your primary business is probably the commodities or working with farmers, I would always suggest you to evaluate solutions available in the market and just use a subscription model or something to just use it. Because developing software and maintaining it and doing all that tends to be expensive when you're trying to do it only for yourself. As long as you have a much larger play in mind, and you don't have the resources. With limited resources, better to evaluate products available in the market and focus on your primary business. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Thank you for answering the questions for all the speakers. And I request Dr. Sagar Deshmukh, Assistant Professor of National Institute of Agricultural Extension Management, to take up the closing remarks.
It is indeed very informative and very new topic. However, we have seen the startups and the founders have very aptly put up the technology at the right place and at the right time, and that too in the right sector. So wherein we see agriculture sector where we are looking for the lot of amendments to be done, lot of transformation to be done, bringing in the synergies in all the aspects of the subsectors of agriculture. So we are pretty much optimistic that these technological interventions will bring up the good changes, and these technologies will definitely help the the farmers as well as the consumers. So wherein the better utilization of the resources, the technological efficiency, and all these resources which we see, the produce, the commodities which we see getting lapsed in the chain, either because of the shelf life issues or the transport issues or any other. There are several issues which we see. However, we are pretty much optimistic that these technologies will help us to tackle the issues and further strengthen and take up the steps towards better India. And we appreciate the efforts taken by these startups and the entrepreneurs to take this challenge further and come up with innovation. So we always see this as an inspiration. The aspiring startup from the course and the other people, other participants can take up these thoughts further, pass on this information, pass on the knowledge to relevant stakeholders so that we see there is a good upliftment happening in the sector. So I thank all the experts who have come here, took out the time out of their busy schedule and tried to enlighten all of us. So we have written thank you all to, have shared the insightful thoughts and given us a new way to think and take things further, contribute further. I also thank our director, Dr. Samaraj, who has been instrumental in helping us in organizing the sessions continuously. Our team, Mr. Yuvraj, Mr. Kaushik, and others who are keen, and most important, all the participants who are continuously been the part of the webinar series, and they are also the motivational point which help us keep going. So that is something which we also want to see in the field tomorrow. We will also want to our startups as well as the key speakers, key participants who are trying to contribute, and at certain stage we will see them also on this forum as experts. So with this, I would thank each one of you for being part of the webinar series. Thank you, everyone.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, one and all. We shall be meeting you the next Saturday. Another topic, 11 a.m. IST. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.